Axios' Mark Caputo just sitting down with the president in Trump's first interview since he signed that agreement with Iran about 24 hours ago. Here's some of what he said.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limit.
No, I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits. We defeated them totally militarily. I did a naval blockade where not one ship was able to get through. Some tried. They didn't, it didn't last very long.
And it certainly brought Iran to the table more than before. However, beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
You heard the incredulity in Mark's voice. We've got much more of this. Mark went on to question the president about his claims that there's been regime change in Iran. And Trump responded to him in that case. He said, I actually think it's regime change, if you want to know the truth. Now, Caputo responds to Trump, how is it regime change if you had, and then Trump jumps in on him and says, because they're different people. Caputo responds, but you have Khamenei Jr. You still have a lot of IRGC officials there. To which Trump responds, well, they're different people. All right, Khamenei Jr. is different from the father. It's almost like that's a late night skit. Okay, there's a lot more news from this headline-making interview, and we're going to be talking to Mark Caputo in just a moment. We've got more for you. But you've heard the president make a number of claims in the interview. For example, this whole issue of regime change. Well, look, Iran's new regime, when he said they're different people, one was the father, now it's the son. Muqtada Khamenei is a different person than his father, who was killed in the U.S. airstrike, which began the war. That may be about where the differences end. Just listen to what Kareem Sadjapur, our global affairs analyst, told me. So, Kareem, is this a new regime that's much more reasonable and less radicalized than the two prior regimes over the past 4 months, or 4 weeks, I'm sorry?
That's false, Saren. It's the same regime. It's new personnel. It's the same ideology. It's a 56-year-old Ayatollah Khamenei instead of an 86-year-old Ayatollah Khamenei. And their fundamental worldview hasn't shifted one iota. So I don't think there's any indication that it's a new group of men with a different ideology.
That sort of just makes the whole point. And as for Trump's claim that the U.S. totally defeated Iran militarily, he has said this, frankly, many times, even during the war itself. But as we have said, when you look at the facts, the reality is that that is not true. Iran's nuclear material, of course, is still there. And we know from Seth Jones and the Center for Strategic and International Studies that Iran still has about 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile and 70% of its launchers. Out front now, Mark Caputo, the White House reporter for Axios, who sat down exclusively with President Trump and shared that clip first with Out Front. Mark, it's really an extraordinary conversation that you just had. I just want to emphasize, this is the first time Trump has spoken since signing the agreement with Iran, right? The memorandum of understanding. He certainly comes off as defiant and defensive in the conversation with you.
He's proud. He thinks the deal, or he's projecting that the deal that he has agreed to, or the memo that he signed, is great because of the stock market and oil prices. That's what he's really fixated on.
So let me play again a little bit more here of where you were pressing him, Mark, on the agreement with Iran that he just signed. Here it is.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limit.
No, I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits. We defeated them totally militarily.
Beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
It's it is, which is the incredulity in your voice, Mark. We just a moment ago laid out the fact that, saying that they have no military is just not true. And as you point out, maybe with your incredulity, $300 billion of a reconstruction fund, unfreezing of assets of $100 billion, the U.S. agreeing that it's going to withdraw or somehow do something that's unclear to its forces in proximity to Iran and the region. Those things are not unconditional surrender. I guess the question for you is, you're sitting there face to face with him. Do you think that he really believes what he's saying to you?
That's one of those enduring questions about Trump, is that when he says what he says he believes, does he really believe it? The reality is he stayed relentlessly on message with this. His view is that their military has been crushed, and let's give him that, is that by and large it's true. I mean, the Navy has been seriously damaged, their missile capacity and the like. Yes, there are some reports indicating it's not as destroyed as Trump says it is, but Iran really took a whipping from the United States. However, the reality is, as a lot of experts predicted at the time, the Iranians are tough and they're resilient, and they had war gamed for this, and they were able to take the whipping and still survive, and were in no mood and were unlikely to unconditionally surrender. And those folks were right. The Iranians have not surrendered unconditionally.
And what about the whole thing on regime change when he was looking you straight in the face and saying it's regime change because it's a different person?
Yeah, that's why I said, well, are you sure about that? You have Khamenei Jr., you have IRGC officials. He said, well, they're different people. Like, well, okay. But the reality is the Iranian military and the IRGC structure, the government structure, had anticipated one day the United States and Israel or its enemies would launch a decapitation strike. And as a result, they came up with something called the Mosaic Doctrine, which essentially said that there'd be a mosaic, a different patchwork of different leaders who could step in when other leaders were killed. And that's what happened.
Yeah, it's just, I find it interesting, as you say, that the question is, does he really believe what he's saying? But your takeaway from talking to him was that he was remarkably that he stayed consistent with what he was saying to you.
He only had 2 hours of sleep. He flew in from.
He does sound like he's got a cold, or so he did sound a little.
But he was in the interview. He did have a lower energy level than he normally does. But his overall presentation was pretty positive, and he just loves the idea that gas prices are coming down, oil prices are coming down, and the stock market is going up. That's what he's really fixated on. And that's sort of the sub-headline of this entire thing, is that Trump had had enough of this war. He'd had enough of people talking about high fuel prices, and he wanted it to end. And this is the way he brought about an end.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it does raise so many questions, given what he said to you about, is this what really people around him are telling him? Is this the bubble that he's in or not? You also asked him about Netanyahu, and obviously that was at the core, their relationship was at the core of this war to begin with. And now it's the fraying of that relationship is core to how this war is ending, or at least how this agreement has proceeded. What did he say about Netanyahu?
He said, I asked him about the relationship with Netanyahu. He said, Bibi's fine, the relationship's fine. He said, but we need to keep him sane. He used that word sane. The implication is that Netanyahu had gone a little nuts. And I asked him, how are you going to keep Israel from attacking Lebanon? And the subtext of that was, and sort of messing up this deal with Iran, something that Trump had lost his temper with Netanyahu over a few days or a few weeks ago. I've lost track of time. And Trump just said, they'll do what I say. That Israel loves me, and what I tell them to do, they will do. So we're going to see if that sticks.